The Philadelphia Eagles are absolutely killing it during free agency, but I'm getting a little bit nervous about what their plan is at linebacker.
You are Locked On Eagles, your daily Philadelphia Eagles podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's going on, Eagles fans? I'm Louis DiBiase, host of the Locked On Eagles podcast, Eagles analyst also over at Bleacher Report. On today's edition of Locked On Eagles, we're going to go over what the plan is, if there is one at all right now, for the Eagles at the linebacker position in free agency. Not many options left. We also discuss the chance that general manager Howie Roseman does invest in this position early in the NFL draft. A wide receiver was released today that I think the Eagles should target. And we also get into what's next for Josh Sweat and Haason Reddick, who apparently are on the Eagles trade block. We thank you so much for making Locked On Eagles your first listen each and every day. Today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, use our promo code, which is in all capital letters, Locked On, for $20 off your first purchase. So, as we all know, the Eagles are murdering it right now in free agency. On Monday, signing one of the most underrated pass rushers in the league, maybe the most underrated pass rusher in Bryce Huff from the New York Jets. They signed Saquon Barkley from the New York Giants, a star, do-it-all running back that, to me, outside of Christian McCaffrey, is the most modern-day weapon in the backfield of any NFL team, maybe Bijan Robinson in there as well. Then yesterday, they bring in Chauncey Gardner-Johnson, the reunion that had to happen. One of the main reasons the Eagles were not the same in 2023 compared to 2022 was because they did not have Chauncey Gardner-Johnson. They've brought in Matt Hennessy, a really solid depth piece for the guard and center spot. Devontae Parker for almost no money, worth a flyer. They've brought in they re-signed their entire special teams unit. Jake Elliott gets an extension today. Rick Lovato and Braden Mann yesterday. So the punter's locked up, long snapper, kicker. Everything is being taken care of, it seems like. You got the big safety move that we were just dying for on this podcast, as you guys heard talk about pretty much like every other show. They got the star running back. They got a really good young edge rusher. But and even cornerback, although they haven't done anything, as you guys have heard us discuss, like we really are thinking more so the draft or trade options are the way you fix cornerback long-term, as well as the development of Keely Ringo and, potentially Eli Ricks. But the one position that I really don't know what the plan is right now, because I trust the Eagles will invest in cornerback early in the draft or through a big trade or through some avenue. That is a position that Howie Roseman does care a lot about. Even though he hasn't invested top picks in it, he has invested a lot of top resources at the cornerback position throughout his time as a GM. But one thing that he has not done is invest a lot in linebacker, and he's doing that yet again. They have Nakobe Dean right now under contract, and that's really it. And we were saying this is finally the year you need to take an offseason and be an outlier version of yourself and invest in positions that normally you wouldn't. Did not think it was going to be running back over linebacker, but Howie Roseman goes out there and signs Saquon Barkley and has yet to do anything at the linebacker position. And again, if they were going to do one big move when it comes to safety versus linebacker, I'd rather have it be at safety. I feel like that's a more important position. Chauncey Gardner-Johnson is a versatile piece that can play in the box, that can play in the slot, that can play deep. Like, that's a position I'd rather have a Chauncey Gardner-Johnson than, go out there and sign a Frankie Louvu from the Carolina Panthers, who made a deal with the Washington Commanders on Monday. So I am glad that if one move was going to happen, it was safety over linebacker. But I did think they needed to make one splash move at this position. Maybe it still will be through the draft, but I thought it was more likely to be through free agency. That hasn't happened. Patrick Queen is gone. He signed with the Pittsburgh Steelers. As I just mentioned, Louvu's in Washington. Bobby Wagner signed today with Washington. Josie Jewell is a Charger. Willie Gay Jr. has signed with a team. So has Jordan Brooks, Levante David, Azeez El-Sher, Jordan Hicks. It is getting bone dry in this market. And I'm getting nervous yet again. Howie Roseman is saying, whatever at this position. Like, we'll figure it out. Patchwork. This is how we do things. And he's going to continue to take this radical approach. And again, they do have Nakobe Dean, and he's somebody that we've all been very high on over the last few years. Maybe he really, truly does still believe that Nakobe Dean is the answer, but I'm starting to think Nakobe Dean is a crutch. He's just a fallback for Howie Roseman to enable his behavior at this position where he says, I don't need to invest a lot because I have a Nakobe Dean. And I still believe Nakobe Dean can be a very good player, but for him to be your plan A, and right now it feels like your plan B, C, and D at this spot, it is a little concerning. And again, they do still have the draft. Like, you could still take an Edgerrin Cooper from Texas A&M, or you could bring in Jeremiah Trotter Jr. You could bring in one of those two players, a Peyton Wilson, just this physical unicorn that runs a 4.4, that's 6'5", with that crazy wingspan from NC State. Like, that is still a possibility, but Howie Roseman has taken two linebackers, or has taken none in the top 2 rounds since Michael Kendricks 12 years ago. He's taken 2 guys in the 3rd round, Dean and Davion Taylor. So I don't really believe that that's a realistic option. I mean, I hope I'm wrong, and the Saquon Barkley signing does give me hope that maybe Howie's looking at things through a different lens this year, but I don't know. It's been very quiet on the linebacker front. Even when they didn't sign a safety, even before they signed CGJ, we knew from reports from Diana Rossini and Tom Pelissaro, Albert Breer, many people were talking that, hey, the Eagles, they actually were gunning for Xavier McKinney. They missed out. They are aggressively pursuing a safety. Even John Clark of NBC Philly said the same thing. So we knew it was on their radar. With linebacker, it's been absolute crickets. And now all the free agents are gone. Even Eric Kendricks, brother of Michael Kendricks, signed today with the Dallas Cowboys. So I don't know what their plan is. Again, I'm hoping it's an early draft pick. They're going to have the capital to where, and especially they already have 2 second-round picks, a first and a third. So they have 4 picks in the first 3 rounds. Let's say hypothetically you trade at least one of Josh Sweat or Haason Reddick. That's going to be at least another day 2 pick in the 2nd or 3rd round. If you trade both, that could be multiple more day 2 picks. So you do have the flexibility where you can take your edge rusher, your offensive tackle, your cornerback, your wide receiver, the positions that you normally take early in the draft, the positions that you normally prioritize, and also be the outlier that finally takes a linebacker in the top 2 rounds. And I'm hoping for the top 2 rounds, not the top 3. But if they don't do that, what other options do they have? Well, right now, some of the free agents to keep a close eye on: Devin White from the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, Jerome Baker from the Miami Dolphins. I mean, after Devin White's not even that exciting. Jerome Baker is okay. Devondre Campbell got released today from the Green Bay Packers, a 30-year-old veteran that the Eagles did actually have interest in a few off seasons ago. Solid players still. Terrell Dotson from the Buffalo Bills is a up-and-coming player that probably wouldn't cost you a whole lot. That feels very much like a Philadelphia Eagles type of move, but none of those guys are to the ceiling of a Patrick Queen, that type of player, or an Edgerrin Cooper in the draft. Again, this was a year that we didn't want to just add a solid linebacker. We wanted to try to find your version of, you're not going to get Fred Warner, but try to find your version of a Fred Warner or a Roquan Smith, or heck, even at least a Matt Milano from the Buffalo Bills. And I think right now, again, unless they take one in the first 2 rounds, unless they do that, your best bet at this point is going to be Nakobe Dean. Nakobe Dean is the best bet to become that player over any of these other guys. Like, Devin White has some crazy athleticism, but I mean, look at his coverage grades over the years. It's not very good. And these other players are, to me, they're just guys. And I wanted to sign somebody that was more than just a guy. And those guys can be solid. And with all the other stars you have at other positions, again, linebacker's not going to make or break you, but it did last year when you had nobody. You have to have at least one, or it can break you. And we saw that when they played the San Francisco 49ers, who are still your biggest threat in the NFC. And that's the one team that exposes bad linebacker play over any. So they need at least one guy, and Nakobe Dean cannot be your only plan. Maybe you look through the trade market, but even looking through the trade market right now, there's not a lot of great options. I thought maybe Zaven Collins from the Arizona Cardinals. They're trying to decide about his 5th-year option. So, that could be something that they look into. Even if that option was picked up, they could look into trading him if they can't get a contract extension done. The Cardinals, we know, have Kazir White and have kind of moved away from Zaven Collins, and they got rid of Isaiah Simmons. That's another player that I'm very intrigued by. Isaiah Simmons is a Swiss Army knife not a do-it-all linebacker that's going to be your fix for that top spot, but he is somebody that I really like if you can use him as that, blitzer off the edge and try to use him the way that Clemson did and finally tap into that potential that he's had since being a first-round pick. But overall, when you look at the free agent and trade market, again, they're just dudes. And that's kind of the reality of the Eagles situation again right now is if they do not, and maybe there's a linebacker I'm not thinking of in the trade market. I didn't think of A.J. Brown a few years ago and they traded for him. So maybe there's a guy out there that's available and we just don't know and how he made the right call. But if they don't draft one of the first 2 rounds, Nakobe Dean is probably your best bet to have a guy that becomes a stud this year, that becomes your new TJ Edwards. Because all these other players available, to me, they're more Kazir Whites. Like, that's going to be their ceiling. But, yeah, I mean, what do you bring back Zach Cunningham? I don't know. It's not looking good. I was really surprised that they did not make a move the first 3 days at this position. But maybe I shouldn't be. I guess I shouldn't be because this is what they always do at linebacker. Just feel like I wasted so much breath on this position over the last few months just for them to, fool me once, shame on me, right? Fool me twice, fool me. What's the rule for fooling me 20 times at this point? I don't know, but I am a little nervous about the position of linebacker. The good thing is the rest of the roster looks really good, especially on the offensive side of the football, where I do not think the Philadelphia Eagles are done. We'll get into potentially some wide receiver options and backup quarterback options next, right here on the Locked On Eagles podcast. Today's episode of the Locked On Eagles podcast is brought to you by BetterHelp. A lot of us spend our lives wishing we had more time. The question is, time for what? For me, it's podcasting. If time wasn't limited, how would you use it? The best way to squeeze that special thing into your schedule is to know what's important to you and make it a priority. Therapy can help you find what that is, what matters to you, so you can do more of it. If you're thinking of starting therapy, give BetterHelp a try. It's entirely online. It's designed to be convenient, flexible, and suited to your schedule. Just fill out a brief questionnaire, get matched with a licensed therapist, and switch therapists anytime for no additional charge. Learn to make time for what makes you happy with BetterHelp. Visit BetterHelp.com/LockedOn today. You're going to get 10% off your first month of online therapy. Once again, that's BetterHelp.com/LockedOn for 10% off your first month of online therapy. We thank you so much for making Locked On Eagles your first listen each and every day. Guys, as you know, Locked On has launched the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel on YouTube, Locked On Sports Today. Baseball fans, mark your calendars for March 20th at 7 p.m. Eastern Time for the best MLB season preview coming exclusively to Locked On Sports Today on March 20th at 7 p.m. Eastern Time. Be the first to get local insight from the MLB local experts of the Locked On Podcast Network. Find it again March 20th at 7 p.m. Eastern Time on the Locked On Sports Today 24/7 streaming channel on YouTube or the free Amazon Fire TV channels app. So the Philadelphia Eagles continue to add in free agency, and Chauncey Gardner-Johnson was the big move on defense, but overall, they've been actually more focused, and of course, Bryce Huff too was a huge move, but overall, the past few years, they've been more focused on throwing money, at least, on the offensive side of the football. Draft picks have been defense. That's kind of what it's been. They spent years and years building up the young core in offense, and then the last couple seasons, they've been taking, Jordan Davis, Jalen Carter, Nolan Smith, Sidney Brown. Like, they are building up Keely Ringo. They're really building up that defense with young, inexpensive players. Nakobe Dean as well a couple years ago. And when you look at in free agency, that's kind of what's happening yet again. Although, again, they signed Huff and Gardner-Johnson, they brought in Saquon Barkley, and they have a lot of interest. They locked up Landon Dickerson as well, the most money a guard has ever gotten in NFL history. They brought in Devontae Parker. I don't think they're done on offense. I think they're going to continue to add. And there's a player that got released today from the Las Vegas Raiders that I really like as an option for that wide receiver 3. And Gino and I have mentioned him before. Actually, at the trade deadline, we said he would be an interesting candidate, considering how bad Quez Watkins was and Julio Jones was just a shell of who he used to be. Olamide Zaccheaus was okay, but you needed an upgrade. Hunter Renfrow was just released, and I like this idea. Again, I think there's better options probably through the draft and even still through free agency, like a Curtis Samuel is still out there, a Tyler Boyd. Maybe if the market doesn't shape up for them the way they thought, they can sign a team-friendly deal to sign with a contender. Like, I love the idea of Tyler Boyd or, a Curtis Samuel. But if they want to continue to go cheaper at this position, especially after adding Saquon Barkley, they can say, look, that's your fourth passing option. Like Saquon Barkley is an elite receiving running back. To me, the only one that's better than him is Christian McCaffrey right now in the NFL. So maybe they can say we will go cheap at wide receiver. We don't need to take a guy in the first 2 rounds or, pay even a Boyd or Samuel like contract. Maybe Hunter Renfrow is that guy. And I'm okay with it. Again, it wouldn't be my plan A, but Gino really likes this idea. So Hunter Renfrow is only 28 years old. As I mentioned, he'd be cheap. He's that technician style of slot receiver that you may want to complement Devontae Smith, Dallas Goedert, A.J. Brown, and Saquon Barkley. Still can't believe Saquon Barkley is in that sentence. I cannot believe he's a Philadelphia Eagle. But Hunter Renfrow could be that guy. Josh McDaniels the last 2 years just never used him. But I will say, back in 2021, this is a player that had over 100 receptions and over 1,000 yards. Like, that was only a couple years ago, and he's going to be your 5th passing target. Like, you could do a lot worse than Hunter Renfrow. And I do still like the idea of a burner at that spot because, again, considering how many targets Brown, Smith, Goddard, and Saquon are going to get, like, that's going to be 95% of your touches on the offensive side of the football, plus Jalen Hurts running the football himself, and you could even throw in Kenneth Gainwell. Like, this player is not going to get the ball a whole lot unless there's injuries, right? So I like the idea of a burner because he can make more of an impact with fewer touches. All he needs is a couple shots, and boom, maybe you get a 1-catch, 40-yard game, but that's huge. Like, that's what you're looking for is more meat off the bone, like just more efficiency in the touches you get. You want that corner 3-point shooter. So that's still the style of guy. Like, again, we talked about this on yesterday's show, and it's kind of a pipe dream, but if you want to go receiver early in the draft, like an Xavier Worthy would be the perfect player for this offense. He's way too good to be a 5th option coming out of Texas, but for the Eagles, it would be awesome. So again, I would want a burner, but I will say, you don't have to. Like, Renfrow is a very reliable player that, again, can complement the weapons you have very well. He lines up in the slot, and if a player goes down like A.J. Brown and Devontae Smith, this is a guy I think would be better in that situation than a burner, like another version of a Quez Watkins or an OZ, because he has had success in the past with more volume, right? Again, in 2021, he was Derek Carr's go-to guy, which, by the way, is the season that they made the playoffs. So, right? Yeah, 2 years ago, 2021. That was the year Derek Carr and Deshaun Jackson was on that team, and they lost to the Bengals in the first round. Yeah, so Hunter Renfrow was the top guy there, and again, had over 100 receptions, and now he'd be your 4th or 5th target in this passing game. Like, I'll sign up for that, absolutely. Again, there's better options. Curtis Samuel, Tyler Boyd, a draft pick in the first 3 rounds probably will give you a better upgrade, but if you want to go cheaper and you want to go with a technician, a slot type of player, and especially since you did also sign Devontae Parker, and he can be a solid boundary backup making almost no money if he can stay healthy and make the roster, maybe Hunter Renfrow makes some sense. I know Gino would sign off on that. I think he's a player that got released today that could make sense for the Eagles. And then a backup quarterback, it sounds like the Eagles are doing work. Apparently, before he signed with the Indianapolis Colts, the Eagles did make a contract offer to the comeback player of the year, a former Eagles quarterback in Joe Flacco, which I like that move. I actually thought about that the other day. They should target Flacco. I like that they're trying to get a veteran, productive backup for Jalen Hurts. I like the upside of Tanner McKee, and you're spending money at a lot of other positions, and you're spending a lot of money at this position with Jalen Hurts. But I will say I wanted a guy like a Tyrod Taylor or another Marcus Mariota, a Joe Flacco. So it was cool to see they targeted Flacco. I think now maybe you still consider another free agent like, a Tyler Huntley would make a lot of sense coming from the Baltimore Ravens. But how about a trade? We've heard a lot of rumors about Justin Fields being paired with the Eagles if they can't get a really solid pick, and it looks like the market is completely dried up for Fields as a starter. Maybe Howie Roseman sends a day 3 pick for Justin Fields, who would be the perfect backup in this offense for Jalen Hurts. Like, that might be the most similar player to Jalen in the NFL right now if there was one. I could also see them trading for Zach Wilson. People did not like when I tweeted that about a month ago, but this was a guy that Howie Roseman only a few years ago was willing to trade up to the 3rd overall pick for if he was available to make the franchise to make him the franchise. So he did show a little bit more last year. Like, again, that's comparatively speaking to one of the worst rookie years we've ever seen. But I will say, I could see them trade for Zach Wilson or one of those 2021 guys. Mac Jones off the board. He's in Jacksonville, but a Justin Fields, a Zach Wilson type, I could see. So those are options to consider. I think you're still going to see some moves coming on offense in the next few days. And I mentioned Renfrow, but the more I think about it, if that market can dry up and it probably won't, it still will be too rich because even a Hollywood Brown hasn't signed, but man, if they could get a Tyler Boyd or a Curtis Samuel, I'm still really in on that just to put this offense even more over the top and even more unstoppable. If that's your fifth guy in this offense, like good luck. Or somebody early on in the draft, it's a really intriguing luxury to have. But if they want to be smart about it, I do like the idea of Hunter Renfrow. Let's get back to some defensive talk. Coming up next right here on Locked On Eagles, Bryce Huff has been signed. Nolan Smith is a guy the Eagles want to invest a lot in next year. So what are they going to do with Josh Sweat and Haason Reddick? Brian Burns was also traded. Could the Eagles get something similar in return for what Burns commanded to the New York Giants? All that and more coming your way right here on the Locked On Eagles podcast. Today's episode of the Locked On Eagles podcast is brought to you by Game Time. You shouldn't have to worry when you buy tickets to your next big event. Game Time is the fast and easy way to buy tickets for all the sports, music, comedy, and theater events near you. I've been going to a lot of comedy lately, thanks to Game Time, with killer last-minute deals, all-in prices, views from your seat, and their best price guarantee. Game Time takes the guesswork out of buying tickets. Game Time is the only ticketing app that gives you complete peace of mind with your purchase. See the view from your seat before you buy, so you know exactly what to expect when you arrive. All-in prices show your total up front, so you know you're getting a great deal before you check out. Buy tickets in seconds with just 2 taps. They're obsessed with finding ways to help you save money on tickets. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, use our promo code LOCKEDON for $20 off your first purchase. Terms do apply. Again, create that account, redeem the code LOCKEDON. You're going to get $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. All right, so the Philadelphia Eagles, they signed Bryce Huff on Monday, one of the most underrated pass rushers in football, an ascending player that they got on a pretty team-friendly deal, honestly. For a guy that was top 2 in almost all pass rush metrics the last few seasons, for him to only command $16 million a year on a 3-year deal, considering most of these players in their prime that had the production of a Bryce Huff are getting 20-plus million, like, it's a really good deal. But again, Bryce Huff didn't play nearly as many snaps as those other stars, so it's more of a projection that he continues to ascend, kind of the way that Haason Reddick did and Josh Sweat throughout their careers. But Bryce Huff is here. The Eagles are planning on him taking a big step and having a bigger role. Same with Nolan Smith. They also re-signed Brandon Graham. So what are they doing with Haason Reddick and Josh Sweat? Well, we know that both have kind of been on the trade block, that they're not going to pay both, especially now that Bryce Huff is in. One of them is all but guaranteed to be out of here in 2024. But then we started to hear rumors from Jeff McLean and from other reporters that they might be looking to move both. And that might be the case. We saw Josh Sweat the other day on Instagram post that he's going to miss everybody. And then Jeff McLean tweeted out the other day again, the Eagles are looking to trade both Reddick and Sweat, and even if they don't get a deal for both, they might end up cutting one of them, and it sounded like that was alluding to Josh Sweat. Here's where I stand with this, and I talked about this on the show last week. I understand why you would trade one of them. Absolutely. Instead of just paying both of them, why not sign a Bryce Huff, another ascending young player that is putting up elite metrics, so you still get one of those elite players in free agency that you pay money to. You retain one of those other guys, one of Reddick or Sweat, but you trade the other one and get back draft picks because you'd probably rather have Bryce Huff, Haason Reddick in a second than just Haason Reddick and Josh Sweat, right? You would want that day 2 pick and Bryce Huff over just one of Josh Sweat or Haason Reddick. So I totally understood that logic. But to trade both, to me, is insane. Like, yes, the stretch run of 2023 was a disaster for those two guys and the entire defense. But I do think those are still 2 top-tier players on the edge, and I don't want to lose both guys. Like, I think it's worth paying 2 players this kind of money at this spot. And again, Bryce Huff's not getting $22+ million a year. He's only getting 16 a year. That's around what Josh Sweat is already making on his current contract. So to me, you could afford to give one of them that deal. Like, to me, it'd be Haason Reddick over Josh Sweat, but it doesn't sound like the Eagles want to give either one of those guys that contract. Maybe they think they're going to trade both, get a ton of picks in the first and second round and then draft a kid and just go really young, which again, I would understand there'd be a lot of talent and upside there, but there's a lot of projections going on. Like you're projecting that Bryce Huff is going to be okay in a bigger role. And again, it's probably going to happen. It happened for Haason Reddick, and I would say it's a good bet to make, but it's not a guarantee. Nolan Smith has all the traits in the world, and you traded up for him in the first round. Shouldn't say traded up, but you selected him in the first round. You got to see through that investment. But you're going to start Huff and Nolan Smith and then a rookie and Brandon Graham as your rotation. I mean, again, I'm okay with going really young on defense, which appears to be the theme at pretty much every position. But it would make me feel better if you had one of those proven players that are in their prime. That's the thing. Haason Reddick is not 35 years old. Josh Sweat is only 26. I do wonder if they're nervous about, especially if McLean's right, that they might just outright release, specifically Josh Sweat. I wonder, even at 26, if they're nervous about the way his knees are going to age. Right? We know he had issues at Florida State. It's why he dropped to the 4th round. Knowing his talent and his upside, that guy should have been a day 1 pick, at least a day 2 selection, not a 4th round pick. But there were injury concerns. I wonder if they're nervous about, knee arthritis. Like, how is he going to age? Maybe that's the reason he slowed down last year when he had a career high in snaps and usage. Maybe they think he can't be that guy that's worth paying $20+ million, which I can kind of understand that logic. But to me, then you pay Haason Reddick. I don't know. I don't want to live in the world where neither one of them are Philadelphia Eagles in 2024. I would really like to have Haason Reddick or Josh Sweat, Bryce Huff. Those are your top 2. Nolan Smith is your 3rd fastball off the edge, and Brandon Graham's your 4th. And then you can draft another player as that 4A, 4B. That would be my scenario. Honestly, I thought that Josh Sweat might be somebody they prefer to keep over Reddick because of the age, and also Bryce Huff's a smaller edge rusher. So is Nolan Smith. So is Brandon Graham. If you also bring back Haason Reddick, that's a really small group of edge rushers. I thought maybe they prefer Sweat over Reddick, but again, maybe they're very concerned about Sweat's usage and his injuries, projecting injuries down the road, that he's not worth that deal, and they maybe don't want to pay Haason Reddick that deal because of his age. Which again, I understand it to a degree, but I do think it would be a mistake to let both of them walk. I hope that at least one of them are Eagles, but we'll continue to monitor what happens. Worst case scenario, you do trade both. At least you're going to have a ton of draft picks, right? Brian Burns just went for a 2nd rounder and some day 3 picks from the Panthers to the Giants. Josh Sweat, he doesn't have the consistency of a Brian Burns, and Haason Reddick doesn't have the age of Brian Burns. So will one of these guys command a 2nd? I think Josh Sweat could. Haason Reddick still could as well, but you're going to get at least a 3+. Like, you're going to have, if one of these guys are going or both, you're going to have multiple more 2nd and 3rd round picks. So you could be looking at a 1st rounder, 3 seconds if Sweat goes for a 2, and let's say Reddick goes for like a 3 and a 5. You could be looking at a 1, 3 2s, 2 3s, 4 or 5 5th round picks. Like, they're going to have a ton of draft ammunition to trade up for that corner, draft that edge rusher, draft that damn linebacker. Heck, go for an Xavier Worthy type of receiver, luxury pick, or a Jatavian Stevens, Sanders, go for a tight end from Texas in the 2nd round. That would be one benefit of trading both, is you're going to have even more draft flexibility than you already do. Or let's flip one of those picks that we trade a Haason Reddick for, and let's go get a J.C. Horn at corner. Or let's go get my boy, if I can get a Greg Newsome from the Cleveland Browns. I am all in on that kind of move. But I will say, I would like the middle ground of give me those picks for one of those players and let me keep one for at least 2024. We'll see what happens. Let me know what you think. Hit me up on Twitter at LockedOnBirds and at DiBiase LOE. We will be back tomorrow for one more show this week, continuing to recap whatever the hell happens in free agency, and there's always something going down for the Philadelphia Eagles. Thank you so much for making Locked On Eagles your first listen each and every day. We'll see you tomorrow. As always, thank you for downloading, thank you for watching and listening, and let's go Birds.